What happens when one of the most famous bandleaders in American history simply vanishes, without a trace, in the middle of a world war? December 15, 1944. Glenn Miller, the man whose music kept morale alive during the darkest days of World War II, boarded a small aircraft from England bound for Paris, and was never seen again.
Noreki. No bodies.
No concrete answers for 67 years. Until now. Today, we dive deep into one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. New evidence, hidden eyewitness accounts, and a mystery that might finally be cracked wide open. So, grab your headphones, lean in, and let's solve the case of the disappearance of Glenn Miller. Before we get into the mystery, let's talk about the man at the heart of it. Glenn Miller wasn't just a musician, he was the sound of the 1940s. If you've ever tapped your foot to In the Mood, Moonlight Serenade, or Chattanooga Choo Choo, you know Miller. But in 1942, at the peak of his fame, Miller did something that shocked everyone. He joined the U.S. military. He was 38 years old, too old for combat, but he knew the power of music in wartime. He traded sold-out theaters for muddy bases and freezing tents, building a military band that played everything from jazz to marches, lifting the spirits of thousands of troops in Europe. Imagine that, a megastar voluntarily walking away from Hollywood to entertain troops on the front lines. That's dedication. And that's what makes his disappearance all the more tragic and mysterious. December 15, 1944. Glenn Miller boards a small, single-engine aircraft called a UC-64 Norseman, alongside pilot John Morgan and Lieutenant Colonel Norman Bessel. The weather? Foggy. Icy. Dangerous. The plane? Not equipped with de-icing gear. The mission? A routine hop from RAF Twinwood Farm in England to newly liberated Paris to prepare for a performance. Simple, right? But the plane never made it. And here's the kicker. There was no radio contact, no Mayday signal, and no wreckage ever found. Now, think about that. This wasn't the vast Pacific, it was the English Channel. A relatively small stretch of water. And still, nothing. It's no wonder conspiracy theories ran wild. For decades, people asked, what really happened to Glenn Miller? Let's break down the top theories and why they didn't hold up. 1. Friendly fire. One of the most enduring stories. That returning RAF bombers jettisoned and used bombs over the channel and accidentally took out Miller's plane. Sounds wild, but for a while people believed it. Why? Because bombers did drop payloads over that area on the same day. But here's the twist. Those bombs were practice rounds already defused before dropping. And the flight paths didn't match Miller's route. Investigators eventually ruled this one out. Still, it was such a persistent theory that it inspired books, TV specials, and debates for decades. Point 2. Spy mission gone wrong. This one's got drama. Glenn Miller was actually on a covert OSS mission. The plane was sabotaged. He was captured. Maybe even executed by the Nazis. Sounds like something out of James Bond, right? Here's the thing. There's zero credible evidence. No intercepted messages, no mission logs, no records. It's all speculation. But hey, if Hollywood ever needs a new period thriller, this plot is ready to go. 3. Died in a Paris brothel? Believe it or not, this was a theory that gained some traction. The claim. Miller did make it to Paris, but died of a heart attack in a brothel, and the story was covered up to protect his image. Again, no evidence. No logs, no hotel records, no witness testimony. Just a story whispered for shock value. This one says more about our culture's obsession with scandal than it does about the truth. Fast forward to 2011. A man named Dennis Sprague, a senior consultant with the Glenn Miller Archive at the University of Colorado Boulder, takes on the mystery. His mission to solve the case once and for all. Sprague dug deep into U.S. and British military archives, many of which had been overlooked for decades. He didn't rely on rumors or old wives' tales. He went straight to the logs, the flight paths, the weather reports. And guess what? Sprague found the smoking gun. Weather reports confirmed icing conditions over the channel that day. The worst possible scenario for a Norseman. Here's what the evidence now shows. The Norsemen likely encountered carburetor and fuel line icing shortly after takeoff. Add in freezing fog, low visibility, and no de-icing system, and you've got a recipe for disaster. This wasn't sabotage. It wasn't a conspiracy. It was a tragic accident, caused by the very elements Glenn Miller braved to bring music to the front lines. Even more fascinating, a 16-year-old plane spotter in Reading, England, recorded seeing a Norseman flying southeast that day on Miller's planned route. That teenager's logbook, forgotten for decades, turned out to be the final puzzle piece. How incredible is that? It's the most unlikely source, a teenage aviation enthusiast, who helped confirm the last moments of Glenn Miller's life. So, you might be asking, why did it take so long to solve this? Great question. Part of it was wartime secrecy. During World War II, the US and UK prioritized military operations over investigating missing persons, especially civilians attached to morale units. Also, many documents were classified, destroyed, or buried under bureaucratic red tape. But the biggest reason, Miller was such an iconic figure that the public didn't want a simple answer. A tragic crash in fog didn't feel worthy of a legend. People wanted drama, sabotage, scandal. Sometimes truth really is stranger and sadder than fiction. While we now know what likely happened, one thing still remains. The wreckage has never been found. The English Channel is vast and treacherous. And because no official flight plan was filed and no distress signal was sent, the exact crash site remains a mystery. Maybe one day underwater drones or sonar will find the wreck. Maybe not. But now we at least know why Glenn Miller disappeared. And that brings some closure. Glenn Miller's disappearance may have overshadowed his death, but it should never overshadow his life. His music lives on. Every swing band, every big band night at your local jazz bar, every high school orchestra that tries to play in the mood. They owe a little something to Miller. He gave us a soundtrack for a generation that faced war, loss, and uncertainty, and still danced. And in the end, Miller did what he always wanted. He played for the troops, right until the very end. Host. So, was the disappearance of Glenn Miller finally solved? After 67 years, yes. Not with drama or scandal, but with patience, research, and a little help from a teenage plane spotter and an archivist who wouldn't give up. But what do you think? Should the search for the wreckage continue? Do you buy the icing explanation? Or do you still believe there's more to the story? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you love stories that mix music, mystery, and history.